So the car is, we've got our arms on, all our camber links, sway bars are on, and next in line to be completed is to build our shock absorbers. So that's bag E, and I'll get this guy open. So a lot of small clips and O-rings in these kits. So we'll go through a few of the bits to start with. So we've got our aluminium shock bodies. The machining and anodizing looks spot on. Very nice looking shock body. Our spring collars, 4 of. Four of those. The lower collar that holds the seal and bush cartridge in, and then our top collar that holds the bladder and everything in the top. So also our plastics. So 1, 2, 3, 4 shock tops, 4 shock bottoms. We should have 4 spring collars, 4 pistons, 4 guides, and our O-rings for our spring collar. So these are just to basically make sure that the spring collar doesn't unwind itself mid-run. And all our pillow balls, 4 shock shafts, our O-rings, and a multitude of tiny little C-clips. Okay, just as a bit of a note, I've actually left my shock O-rings from another set. I've had these sitting in some oil all day, just to get them to basically absorb some of that silicone and maybe just swell up to size a little bit so we can check fit. So I'll be using those in this particular build. It's always a good idea to soak those O-rings because they will swell a little bit as well. So first of all, I'm just going to demonstrate building one shock. The process is the same, obviously building the rest. So I'm just going to get the spring collar, and I'm just going to get that O-ring in there. He's going to be a little bit of a pain at times. So there's a groove in there that O-ring sits in nicely. And I'm just going to put a little bit of my blue grease just on the body of the actual shock. Just a little bit, just to help that O-ring, and just a little bit up in the collar. I'll just help it be easier to sort of turn the collar on. So thread that pretty much all the way up to the top. So quite obviously the step is down towards the bottom because that's where the so this is the top, that's the bottom. This is where the spring's gonna, that's the landing for the spring. So it's gonna go like that. Okay, so once you've got your collar on, what we're going to do is just assemble the piston onto the shaft. So just take one of the very small C-clips, one of your shock shafts, and we just want to put it in the bottom groove there. So I'm just going to just tip it upside down and just press it down on my board, and it snaps into place. Now I'm a bit particular when I put the pistons on. I'll make sure that the whole set is put on the same way. On these pistons you can see there's two large sort of casting marks. I'm going to have those face towards the thread. I'm going to make sure that all of them are the same when I assemble them. So slide the piston on, and then I'm just going to use my 2.5mm because it's fairly rounded on the end, and just snap that into place. Now sometimes with a circlip system you'll find that the pistons are quite loose and sloppy on the actual shaft. Generally you might have to use a little bit of super glue or something like that to make sure it's not bobbling around everywhere. This is a perfect fit, so nice and tight and spot on. Next thing, just go over some of your components. So this is the guide. It has a step in it. There's a little step that will actually locate. It'll come in from the other side of this, but it fits nicely in the bottom hole of the aluminium. So when it's assembled, it will be in that side, but just for demonstration. So that locates and holds the shock shaft central in the actual O-ring, as well as going up through the bore. Okay, so we're just going to put a bit of oil in the bottom of the shock, and I'm going to fish out one of these O-rings that I've had soaking in my shock oil, and then we're going to place the lower bush on with the step facing away from the body of the shock. And then we're going to put the cap on. I'm going to take it all the way down, but then we're going to back it off, say half a turn to 3/4 of a turn. Reason being is when we slide in the piston shaft or the shock shaft, we've got a bit of a step here where it goes from the threaded part to the steel shaft. When this bottom cap is tightened up, it actually squeezes on the O-ring and it makes the O-ring hole smaller than if it was just sitting on the bench or whatnot, because it squeezes, and that's what keeps the oil in. So if we loosen that off just a little bit, just until we get the shock shaft down in, and then we can close it up. So what I like to do is I'm going to hold my finger over the bottom of the shock body, and then I'm actually going to pretty much fill this to the top. So now we've got a full body full of oil, and then over a container, because as soon as I take my finger away from the bottom it's going to just ooze oil out. So this way, as the shock shaft goes down, it's going to go through all the silicon, get nicely lubed up, and also it's going to pull a bit of oil down into the seal cartridge and hopefully take away any sort of air bubbles that are down in there. So here we go. I'm just going to drop that in there, take my finger away from the bottom, a bit of oil is going to come out, and then I'm just going to push that down, and then we can drag. Once it's past the shoulder and the thread, we can do the bottom up, and then we can pull it all the way down. So it's a bit of a messy job at times, building shocks. You generally get silicone oil all over your fingers and over your setup board, so make sure you have, even if you have some paper towel or some rags on standby, just to clean up any mess that you might end up with. So now it's a little bit of a waiting game. We want to make sure that there's no air in the oil when we close the lid. So I'm just going to give it a little bit of a flick, and that'll hopefully get a fair bit of the bubbles coming to the top. I'm going to double check that that's nice and tight, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to lift the piston almost to the top of the fluid. We don't want it to come out of the fluid, but we're going to let it come all the way up, and we're going to give it another little bit of a flick just to release any bubbles that might be caught on the side of the body or down in that seal cartridge. We want those to flow to the top, and then the next time that we drag the piston down, we're going to give it a little twirl as we go down, just so that any bubbles that are caught underneath, maybe they're not directly underneath one of the holes in the piston, and as we pull it down and twist it and twirl it, we'll see a few more bubbles come out. So I'll see if we can get that over here. So I have to have a look myself. So there's a couple of small bubbles just coming out of there now. So there's many theories on building of shocks. There's really no right or wrong way. You just build them to the conditions that you think are going to be right for your setup. A lot of guys will go with next to no rebound when they build a shock. So that means that when you push in the shaft basically acts dead. It doesn't try and push itself back out, and that all has to do with the bladders. So really, typically I'd leave this sit for quite a bit longer and maybe repeat that same process that we did just before, but for the sake of getting on with the job here, I'm going to assume that we've got no more bubbles and we're good to go. So I'm going to top this all the way up to the very top. Okay, and we'll just get rid of those bubbles. What I'm going to do is I'm going to rest this on my shock pliers, and then I'm going to push it down until it bottoms out, like that. So now the piston is partially way up the ball, and this way I've got an accurate way of building these shocks all the same as well. Next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to slide. So I want to slide this bladder on in a motion like that. So trying again not to trap any oil underneath. Okay, so we can see a bit of oil coming out over the edge. That's very normal. And then what I'm going to do is I'm just going to push down and basically just let the weight of the tool, I'm not actually pushing down on it, it's just the weight of the tool has pushed that that bladder down. Again, repetition. So the weight of the tool, it's going to stay constant. I'm not pushing it down, it's just the weight of the tool has pushed that down. So then we're going to put on our shock top, and then I'm just going to rest it there. I'm not going to try and twist it or anything yet, because what I need to do is actually get my finger, I'm going to push down on the top of the shock. So that's actually pushing down now on that bladder and holding everything in position, and keeping pressure with this finger. I'm going to get the collar down to where it's just about to start. So still holding pressure on the top. Still holding pressure down while we're doing it up. And there we go. Just cleaning that up just on a rag. Okay, so this is built up with a little bit of rebound, not an overly huge amount, but the rebound is, this is when we push it in, then we have the shock shaft come back out. It's probably maybe a 60 to 70% rebound. For me, that's fine. As long as all the shocks build up the same, and we end up with the same amount of rebound, I'm happy to deal with it like that. There's ways that you can you know, make the build easier if you want a really dead shock. You can drill a little hole, being very careful, but you can drill a small hole, a little vent hole down through the top of the shock body and then coming out into the cavity underneath, and that'll allow you to build a shock that's quite dead. Again, you're just going to have to experiment and find out what your setup likes, what your car likes, how you like to drive, what sort of track you're on. Again, no right way, not really any wrong way for rebound and stuff like that. It's just another tuning thing. Alright, so that's one down, and just repeat the process for the other three. So now that we've got all 4 of our shocks built, we can now go ahead, and we could have done this a bit earlier, or you can even probably do this while you're waiting for the air bubbles to come up out of the shocks. We're going to install the pillow balls into the shock end. These shock pliers are one of the best investments you'll ever make. They make popping in ball ends and stuff just so easy, and also great, as we'll see shortly, when we go ahead and actually wind these shock ends onto the shock shaft. Really easy to mark one of those shock shafts, and once you've done that, you might as well throw it in the bin, because it's never gonna seal that oil in again. So last one to go in here. You can, of course, if you don't have these, just basically just rest it on the bench and also just push down on it. The beauty of these as well is actually getting them out is a breeze as well. You just push down and apart it comes. So saves stabbing yourself in the hand if you're trying to push it out from the other side with a driver. So go ahead and do that to the top of the shocks as well. These actually are pushing in quite easy, so I'm just going to use my finger. Okay, so we're going to wind the ball end onto to the bottom of each of the shocks. In the manual it says that we should start with an overall length from plastic to plastic of 56.5. So I'm going to grab that shock shaft with my pliers, and we're going to start winding this ball end on. Again, this is another one of those moments where you really want to check to make sure that everything's going on straight and square. That's taken off lovely and is winding on a breeze. So grab the verniers, make sure they zero out, and we're looking for 56.5. So at the moment we're 57.3. So approximately one turn will see that pretty much exact. So give that one turn. And 56.8. So a little bit more, a little bit finer pitch than 1 mil. So just a little bit more of a crank on there. A little bit more. So that's pretty much there. I'm just going to give it one tiny little bit more, and that should measure, yeah, exactly, well, pretty much exactly 56.5. 2.45, good enough. Okay, so go ahead and do the same to the other 3. So we've got our 4 shocks now built up, all at the same length, ready to put on the car. So what we can do is we're going to grab our springs, and written in very small writing but fairly legible to a decent set of eyes, we have the spring rate written on each of the springs. So they're the 2.5s, and then this pair here is the 2.6. So the 2.6s are going to go on the front of the car. So we'll mount those up now. And the 2.5s are going to go on the rear of the car. So I'm going to put them up there, signifying the front, and then the 2.5s are going to be on the rear. Very good. You also